Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is muffle. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear muffle used is to mean to make a sound quieter or less distinct. So we might be making something quieter by covering it or using some other object so that it isn't quite as loud. A second way you might hear muffle used is to mean to wrap or cover something for warmth. Could be yourself, it could be another thing or another person. Not as commonly used, but another way to use it. A third way you might hear muffle used would be to restrain or conceal someone with coverings or wrappings. Now, this is not a definition or usage I hear or see very often. I think it might be more common, perhaps in storytelling and literature, that you might encounter this particular meaning use. A fourth way you might hear muffle used is to mean to keep something down or to suppress. So this might have to do with an idea, some of our feelings, right? But we're not talking about them, we're not sharing them, we're sort of keeping them down, keeping them inside. I think the first and fourth definitions are certainly more common for you to either see or hear as you read or talk with others. You should know that muffle is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, we need to drop the E and then add ing to form muffling. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, muffle, ol, ends in a voiced L sound. So our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound. We're not adding an extra syllable as we say this. It should sound like this: muffled, muffled. Now, there's one phrasal verb you might hear, and that is muffle up. It ties back to our first definition of trying to silence something or dampen, kind of reduce how loud a particular noise or sound is. An example of this might be, the walls in my apartment don't muffle up many sounds coming from my neighbors. So whatever sort of insulation that exists in these particular walls isn't helping reduce or dampen the noises that come from one's neighbors. Now let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we're going to practice the imperative and the present perfect. Let's start with the imperative. We use this verb tense to tell another person or group of people to do something. It's unique in English because we don't have a subject, or a stated one at least. Our subject is implied, meaning whomever I'm speaking to or whomever I'm talking to, right? I'm saying, you do this action. So in the imperative, we can start the sentence with our base verb. You can see that in my affirmative example here: muffle your footsteps. So this might be put socks on, right? Socks might make the steps a little quieter, softer, or take your shoes off. That could be something, right, that reduces the sound. Now, with the imperative, sometimes it can seem quite direct to tell another person to do some action. So you can soften things, make things a bit more polite by using please. So you could say, please muffle your footsteps, or muffle your footsteps, please. Either of those would work, but you only need please in one place. You don't have to put it at the beginning and the end. Now let's look at a negative imperative sentence. To do this, our structure is going to be do not and then the base verb. And again, we could add please to the beginning or please to the end to try and make things sound a bit more polite. An example here of an imperative might be, don't muffle women's voices. Right? So this, I would say, really ties back to that fourth idea of suppressing, keeping something down. I saw this command actually in an online discussion. Someone was trying to talk about something, and I would say men essentially were interrupting and inserting things and their own ideas, and someone else was trying to create this word like we need to listen to women's voices on this particular topic. Now let's take a look at the present perfect. We use this verb tense to either talk about an action that started in the past and continues into the present, or we might use it to describe something that happened in the past, but it occurred at an unknown time or an indefinite point in the past. To make present perfect sentences, we do need to pay attention to our subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use have and then the participle form of my verb. And because this is a regular verb, participle is the same as the past tense. Now, if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use has and then the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has muffled the global conversation on environmental issues. Saw a sentence rather similar to this. The article is a couple months old, but the idea here being there's been so much focus that now other issues, in this case environmental ones, aren't getting as much attention or focus. So kind of that idea of suppressing or keeping down the conversation, or even silencing here, right? Making there be less conversation about this. If I want to make a negative present perfect sentence, again, I'm going to pay attention to my subject and then use have or has, and then after that, not, and then the participle form the verb. Here's another example. Masks haven't muffled the students' voices. So I've heard a few teachers use sentences like this. Like they thought maybe it would be really hard to hear some of their students speaking. They're like, no, 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 no. Our students are still loud and making noise. It hasn't reduced the sound. Lastly, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, we're going to start with have or has, whichever form matches our subject. Subject comes next, and then the participle form of the verb. You can see that in the example, have they muffled their political views? So this would be that idea of kind of keeping down or suppressing one's thoughts, one's opinions on politics. Now let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb muffle. And I have to tell you, I learned something new as I was kind of exploring this word. I am not an artist. I'm not very creative or talented with crafts and those types of things. So I learned that muffle can be a noun, and that noun refers to part of a furnace or part of a kiln that's used like with pottery and ceramics, where you can put something in it and have it sort of heated without coming into contact with that heat source. Okay? So an example here. This furnace has a ceramic muffle with embedded heating from 4 sides. Okay, so if you're an artist or interested in that topic, maybe you've encountered this noun or heard it used as you've worked on your pottery. Another more common word is the noun muffler. This can have a couple different meanings. One is to refer to the device that is connected or fixed to the exhaust system on a car or other motor vehicle, and it helps reduce the noise that it makes. So I've included a picture here. I'm going to put my cursor so you can see, right? This is a car muffler. So an example of this noun in a sentence might be you're asking your mechanic, does the muffler need to be replaced? Maybe that all of a sudden your car is making a lot of loud noises. You have this question. A second way you might hear muffler used is to refer to some sort of wrap or scarf that has been worn around someone's neck, many times it's there to help keep them warm. So I've included a picture here. Got a lovely gentleman here with a muffler around his neck. I will say, where I live, I hear people use scarf way more commonly, but in other regions, you might encounter this particular word, and you might hear a parent say to their child something like, "Don't forget your muffler, it's cold." The last thing we're going to look at is, it should be an adjective, not a phrase, my apologies, and the adjective muffled. So with this adjective, we're describing something that is not loud because it's either being blocked or obstructed in some way. Somehow it's being muted or made softer. So an example, can you hear the muffled voices? Right? So can't hear words coming out, but right, some noises that make you think, hey, there are people talking. I feel like I've seen this adjective used again in a lot of literature to kind of paint this picture that like someone can hear some sort of noise, sounds, one's voice, but it's not loud and clear, right? It's being dampened. The sound is being reduced. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.